Welcome everyone who's been here. Thank you for coming tonight. On behalf of Respect Life through St. Joan of Arc Parish, I welcome all of you to hopefully gain some good fruitful conversation tonight. We have our two panelists here, Alex and Josh, and they'll be giving our presentation and witness both personal and professional on adoption and foster care. So I'm going to have us join in prayer because I think we are gathered together in prayer, so we might as well begin with it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together tonight. We pray for all those in the cold. Thank you for our opportunity to travel here, to be safe and warm and well-fed and well-clothed. We pray especially for those who do not have these simple blessings tonight, and we pray for your light and your love to be with them, Lord. We thank you for the gift of gathering together, and we pray that in the words spoken tonight and the utterings of your heart in each of ours, that we are able to follow your lead and to be your light and your love to all those we encounter. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
I can come in. Okay.
Just
All right.
speak up.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily. And then special shout out and thank you to my wife, Aubrey, for the flyer and kind of bringing the idea to the table and volunteering me to be a part of that. So I'll just start a little bit off with kind of an overview of what I'm personally going to kind of touch on. I've got a few different things I want to really some ideas I really want to try and get across tonight. So obviously want to share a little bit of my story, but also I think also there's been this kind of calling on my heart personally to throughout my life, when I think of how my life is woven together and the different opportunities I've had and all those things to try to communicate ideas or missions, and that's just been something that really motivates and inspires me. Recently I've kind of listened to this podcast that I'll get into later a little bit, but there's really been this feeling and this thought on my heart to just bring more of that truth and understanding to more people. So just to kind of take a few steps back a few years, I was adopted out of the foster care system when I was about 3 years old, and I'll stay out of some of the background, but other than my bio mom just had some things she was dealing with, and we were in a homeless shelter. I was born in Missouri. We were in a homeless shelter on the Kansas side of Kansas City, which put me in the foster care system in Kansas, and I was adopted into a family, the Olsons, that had 4 kids of their own, and they decided, my mom had always been interested in orphans at the time and driving by orphanages and always felt called to do something, so they began adopting kids and adopted 7 kids and fostered about 100 kids or so. I'm the youngest of the 11, but I'm not the last adopted. So I have an older brother who's 8 years older than me, 9 years older than me, that was adopted after me. So a lot of the kids they adopted were older youth that were harder to adopt, but I was adopted at a little bit of a younger age. Always saw it really as a blessing and not necessarily a hindrance, but because I was in a home where there was young people coming and going, and my wife loves to joke because I shared a room with one of my older brothers who was far older than me, who had some intellectual challenges, and so him and I shared a room for a long time when I was really young, and shared with other people. I think there was probably like 3 of us in a room at one time, but it was kind of just obviously what was normal to me and what I observed and what I saw. And I saw a lot of love in the home that I grew up in and was raised in, and a really a really important village around the home I grew up in with people from our church growing up. So that was always something that was really, really important to the framework of the way I saw life. I saw the even ability for somebody to foster and adopt that many young people. So that's a lot of where kind of the background of my story lays. When I got older, when I was in high school, I had actually I had two siblings that were in college to become social workers, and at that point, my mom had started to foster again, just because she had been, president of the like the local chapter of oh my gosh, not Keisha. Oh my gosh. Nah, that's not important. But the local Kansas agency, and so decided at the age of about 80 or 75, she was gonna jump back in to open up the house that had space for more young kids that were in the system. She'd get a email list of about 120 kids every week that they were looking for homes. And so I think the most during that time when I was in middle school and high school that were ever at the house were five or so kids at a time. And I truthfully really wanted to do something in the foster care system. Thought I was gonna go become a social worker, and I was volunteering at a local thing for National Honor Society in high school, and some guy was like, "You don't want to be a social worker, they're overworked and underpaid." And I was like, "You're right, I don't want to do that." So I met this DA who was like, "Oh," she said she came into our civics class and said she lobbied on Capitol Hill. So I was like, "That's what I want to do. I want to lobby on Capitol Hill and advocate for rights of those that are in the system, and also for social workers, and get them better paid so that they can be more impactful." And so really just was kind of involved just locally in not formally involved, but one of the things, my parents are white, so the overwhelming statistic of black kids that are raised by white parents that come out of the foster care system is pretty prevalent when you look just statistically at numbers nationwide. And so just being able to kind of talk about my experience to other foster parents and other even young people that were struggling in their placements or in their adoptive parents' homes was kind of something that I began doing informally as when I was in high school, and just kind of speaking the truth about how I felt about things, and also supporting other people that were in that situation or younger kids. Being just my family being so big, there was just people that said, "Oh, I've got this friend that's fostering and they're having issues at home." So just being somebody that could go over, hang out, and that was kind of how that started. But really formally started in 2019. Had the opportunity to go out to DC to work for one of the senators, the Missouri senators, and through a nonprofit called the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. And the history behind that organization, and I'm sure Josh will share some things about that, but it was really a four-chair caucus with two senators, two House members, one from each party, and they created it to really help with the bipartisanness that you see in foster care and adoption. So it's a pretty split issue, if you will, on Capitol Hill. And there's obviously everybody's going to have their different side of some of that gray area, but overall, it took 12 former foster youth from around the country out to DC to work in a senator's office and help write legislation to impact the system based on lived experience, and then to also just have the opportunity to internship in a senator's office. So I got the opportunity to do that. That's where I met Josh. was a blast. It was a ton of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun getting to work out there. Met some really interesting people. But then, honestly, through that opportunity, that was really the springboard, if you will, to some really cool opportunities. Josh introduced me to some folks at Adopt US Kids, and we both got on some different boards and some different organizations that were doing stuff nationally. So got the idea to really center around just, aspects of the system that I was really passionate about. And I have continued that into my, adult life, and Josh and I continue to be resources to other young people that are younger than us, to pass that torch on. If somebody's got a little bit of fire for advocacy, trying to push them into that direction. We've gotten to do some cool stuff down at the State House here in Indiana to bring young people in and really go speak to state senators. So it's been a ton of fun being able to do that. But I think one of the big missions that's been really that's really spoke to me and been on my heart is talking about just fatherhood, and how we can impact and help to build up young men that are going through this system. Not just even young men that are in the foster care system, but young men who are experiencing the effects of fatherlessness. So through one of our boards that we got involved in, a woman named Lynn Johnson, who was the Assistant Secretary of HHS under the Trump administration, she began kind of making some connections with us and doing some things. And I got the opportunity to talk to a man named Jack Brewer. He played on the Vikings, and one of his big initiatives that he pushes out in Florida is he's done the whole NFL thing, and now he's just really in Florida helping to address fatherlessness. And so that's just kind of something that he's really felt called to do is address just some of these things. I think it's really important as we think about this topic of being pro-life, and also supporting from womb to tomb. It's building up young men that are ready to be fathers, right? Are able to accept this beautiful blessing, to be a mother or a father, or be there for a mother when you're having a child. So my adopted father passed when I was 10, so he wasn't really there for my adolescence to help with that transition into manhood. And my biological father also passed when I was younger. So it was just one of those missing pieces that I think maybe the foster care system still and you can not blame that on the system as well, but one of those just missing pieces that I think was still and still maybe missing from that amazing blessing. And that may sound like I'm bashing it, but I'm not. I'm just saying that that's an area I think that's really important to bolster. And I think one of the ways you can bolster that is with men from the church, women from the church that are supporting the growth of young men. And I put this, I actually had this podcast, which Rick is the one who actually put me on the Wild at Heart. But they have a Wild at Heart podcast, and Melinda's even heard me talk about this, and I've had a lot of conversations with Aubrey about this. But there's this beautiful episode that's all about how God sees you, and Josh and I were involved in, and then Josh, after this I'll move it over to you, and we can circle back to some other ideas. But Josh and I were involved with this national nonprofit that we both are pretty involved in, or were pretty involved in. And I was riding in the car, and there was four men in the car we were in Branson, Missouri, and we started having just a conversation. And I don't even know how we got here, but I was in the back. There was one guy driving, and then there was four of us in the car total. Nobody was in the middle. And somehow we got on the topic that three of these men in the car all agreed that their life, and they were all in the system, and three of them all agreed that they would have been more happy if they would have never, if their mother would have terminated the pregnancy and aborted them. So just being there for that conversation, and me trying to kind of push back and be like, you don't really mean that, but to hear that from three young men my peers my age to think that their life, not only has their life experience led them to believe this, but also their understanding and how God views them, or their lack of understanding in how God views them. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's lost people everywhere. There's lost people that have a relationship with God, as well as the people that don't have a relationship with God. And I think it's really important that as we're having this discussion today, it's more like, I think we have some call to actions, and Josh has some really cool resources to share, but it's also important to just think about how we are helping to uplift other people. How are we filling them with life? How are we helping them to understand the gift and the beauty that they're able to experience, and how are they able to view themselves how God views them? Maybe not how society has viewed them, or how somebody who was supposed to take care of them has not treated them responsibly. So the podcast is really talking about how God sees you, and they're kind of setting the stage for this in this story, and they're talking from the movie Les Mis, and they're talking about Jean Valjean, and they're talking about the beginning of Les Mis, and he is this criminal in France, and he goes to a priest's home, and he's staying at the home, and to this point he has just gotten out of prison. He has this rep, right? He thinks of himself as, I'm a criminal, I don't have anything, this priest is letting me stay here, and this is kind of the start of the quote. He says, "I'm dangerous, I'm a criminal, I'm a thief. As a result of what he has come to believe about himself, he acts. Our behavior and our actions reveal our core beliefs 100% of the time," says Dallas Willard. "Everything that we do in alignment with what we believe, and more so what we believe about who we are." So I think it's important that we help point people to understand who they are when they don't see it for themselves. Every single one of us carries a yellow passport, and at the beginning of the journey of restoration is discovering what is written in my yellow passport, so that I can bring that before God, and then begin the journey like Jean Valjean, my brother. I ransom you from fear and hatred, and now I give it back to God. So one of the beautiful things he goes on to talk about is Jean Valjean actually steals some silverware from the priest, and he tries to leave with the silverware. So he's still in this mindset of, I'm a criminal, I'm a thief, and the priest actually, Jean Valjean gets caught, and the priest deals with it in a whole different way that flips his perspective on life, because the priest basically lies and says, like, oh no, I gave it to him. And he's thinking, what? Like, everybody in my life has put me in this box and said, Jean Valjean, you're a thief, you're a bad person. And he keeps obviously, replaying that narrative. And this priest treats him with a love he's never experienced, and it flips his whole way that he looks at himself. He thinks, why am I worthy of this love? And that's something that really changes his life. So that's something to ponder, think about. I'll turn it over to Josh to talk about his story, and then we can get into a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, first off, I apologize. I've been kind of losing my voice a little bit today. It's a little cold outside, but hi folks, Joshua Oswald here. I'm going to start off saying thank you to Aubrey for your hard work in putting this together and spreading awareness. Super cool. Thanks for having me here. I am a young person who grew up in the system, and I also work in it today. It's been a pleasure to work with people like Alex and other peers that really have made a difference in my life, and we have such a shared normalcy in so many ways. It's been a pretty cool journey. A little bit about my story. I'm a Hoosier. I grew up in Indiana for about 2 decades and about 18 homes. I'm the youngest out of 6 siblings and experienced a lot of trauma growing up. Remember at the age of 4, this was a big moment in my life. I remember getting locked in some dark room, and I was scared by a mask in a window. Along the same timeline, somebody had introduced me to church. I vaguely had some type of knowledge about the church at that point. So I just started praying, and honestly, haven't really stopped ever since then. I remember from 7 to 11, me and my siblings experienced a lot of different abuse in the same longest placement we were ever in. That was very terrifying. And then one day I had a friend on a bus that I confided in. I said, just kind of said, hey, here's what's all going on. And she didn't give me a choice. She said, either you're telling the school or I'm telling the school. It's an adult school. 11 days later, or a few days later, I don't think it was quite 11, but we found ourselves leaving. All you saw was sirens, case managers, police officers, everybody kind of who gathered around to kind of rescue us and help us get to a better place. From the ages, at the age of 13, I remember I was placed in a juvenile detention center. There wasn't any homes available for me, and this happens to a lot of kids in our state already and all around the country, really, but if there's no available foster home, then you'll often be put in a residential, and if there's no room in a residential, it could default to a juvenile detention center. That's no fun at all. I was very angry with God at this point in my life, and I had repented and from some things I had said during that time. It was a very challenging time, and so I ended up having this feeling in my gut. I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask my judge, just, is it possible for me to age out of care? Because my whole life I had gone through these failed adoptions, right? Their end goal was always adoption, but they always failed. And they granted my wish, so at that point I started thinking about what it would look like to age out without parents, and what would my life look like in that kind of matter. In high school, this was a fun time in my life. I remember I went to 4 different high schools. My first one was 7 classes a day. My second one was an AB block schedule. It was like 4 classes one day and 3 the other, plus a study hall, I think. And then my third one, there was tri-semesters instead of semesters. And then the fourth, back to 7 classes a day. When you're in the system, when you're moving and you're going through the educational system at the same time, you don't really get the opportunity to switch over Christmas break or over your birthday, summer, whatever vacation time you have off school. So that was really challenging, and I basically kind of learned how to read and write around 16. Had some great tutors. Shout out Arsenal Tech. Don't know if we know any Titans around here. But along the same way and same path during this time, God put somebody in my life who was going to change everything. Matthew Oswald was my case manager, came in the door and shook my hand, gave me a lot of respect. Respect I haven't seen in quite a long time. He was a lot of fun. I'd call him when I was crying, and I would call him when I was winning a track race to just, I knew he'd be proud of me. He was quite awesome. He took me to school twice a week. He'd get up from Indy, drive to Crawfordsville, get me to school, and come back. It's a lot of dedication. And then one night, a couple years into our relationship, one night, a week before I was 18, he calls me. He's like, hey bud, how's it going? And I said, well, I'm going to bed. It's 10:30 at night. How are you doing? And so he proceeds to kind of just educate me and let me know that he and his wife have been praying, and they wanted to welcome me into their home. Keep in mind, when I was 13, I kind of didn't think this was God's plan for me, right? He answered my prayers in a whole different way, in a whole different timeline. It's his time, not mine. Always is. And so I told him I'll get back to him. And then I called my brother in the military, and I was like, hey, there's this home. I have this mentor. I've had him in my life for a couple of years. He's a case manager. Should I do this? And he said yes, and I was just so scared that I was going to ruin the one relationship that was a really good one in my life. And still is today. And so he convinced me I deserved a family, and so I moved in, and then there was also another little foster boy. He was 2.5 at that time. And then 6 months later, I I sat them down. They were really nervous. They thought I did something at school or something like that. And I just asked them if I can call them mom and dad. So they were crying and they said yes, and it's been quite fun. And another fun fact, after they took Jonathan, my little brother, who was 2 at that time, 2 and a half, and they took me, they had experienced about 5 to 7 years of not being able to get pregnant. And so when all that stress went away, when they were just like, okay, we're gonna have kids, whether it's foster kids, adopted kids, or biological kids, it's all gonna mean the same thing. When they went to that mindset, God blessed them with 2 little biological babies too. They're not babies no more, but they were. So, Ray, when I was in my mom and dad's house, I mean, it was my senior year. I didn't have a lot of time, but started getting into college, started excelling in my sports, and I started thinking about what it would look like to a call to action. In the beginning, it was an era of speaking to churches, probably done 1,000 speeches. I still get nervous every single time. But I was speaking to churches, and then about a year later, my brother, who was in the military, kind of passed away due to some things that probably aren't too relevant here, but that made me switch to be like, okay, well, how can I stop talking and how can I start making change? I wanted to make that kind of difference. So I just prayed to God. I said, if I could just help one person, that would be so cool. One of our mentors, Jerry Milner, who ran the United States Associate Children's Bureau, I messaged him one day on Facebook and I was like, hey, my name's Josh, I'm from Indiana. How would you feel about talking? I had no idea what I was doing because he was a politician. He was so open, and he's been such a great mentor for us, and he really just took us underneath his wing. He gave me opportunities in DC. I spent time with Alex on Capitol Hill, and coming back to Indiana after college, I was Indiana's private policy manager for our entire private sector. So we got about 170-ish private agencies in Indiana. About 108 of them are associated with an association. And so I was their policy manager for a couple years. That was wild. And then today, believe it or not, I'm a case manager, and it's a lot of fun. I'm also a foster parent myself with my wife, so super excited to be in this arena. And we just actually had our first successful reunification where our foster teen daughter, we want to do teens, thinking about if we're going to continue to do teens.
Good luck.
But she just went home over the weekend, so we're in an era right now where I come home, it's my dog, my wife's home, like 4 hours later. She's a crisis therapist. She does a really meaningful work for the community, and so it's just a little lonely, I guess I'm trying to say. But we're healing, and we're also grieving at the same time, and we're kind of rejuvenating. This is kind of our time to rejuvenate. Been telling Alex what it looked like if I got an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old. Never thought I would say something like that, to be honest. But it's been a joy, and teaching her, I guess the things I can walk away that I'm really proud that we did in the last 7 months is, A, we led her to Christ. I've never met a 15-year-old, even as a case manager with all my foster parents I help lead, that just walks around and sings Bible songs all day long. And I'm like, this is great. We were just loving her up, going to church, just trying to do the right things. And of course, we're not perfect, but trying to model to her what good parents should be doing. We prioritized school a lot. It was a big struggle, but we prioritized it. We held her accountable. She also had a lot of freedom. I think letting her kind of drive my car once when we were in there a couple times, that was a lot of fun. Her bio mom and us have had a lot of success with co-parenting. Sometimes you'll see, I won't actually, hardly ever will I see any of my foster parents and the bio parent communicate too often. And that was a law we changed like 5 years ago to promote that. It's called co-parenting. Because we should wrap around the orphan and the widow, right? And so that's kind of made sense. But today it's not always a reality, but I will say we're very grateful that we've been able to do that this whole time with her mom, and her mom's been good, and she's been proven time and time again that she's willing to do what it takes to get her kid back. So that wasn't my story, but I gave her a big hug on Saturday and I said congratulations. You know, if you need anything, I'm 10 minutes away, kind of thing. And 2 hours later, our foster daughter, she called me back. She's like, I left my Apple Watch. So I drive it over there and give it to her, and a couple other things I found. Couple call to action things you can think about, or I wanted to just mention for you to think about, is Benchmark. That's where I work. We're a foster parent agency. We got a bunch of swag bags over there, and yard signs. Believe it or not, yard signs are like one of the best recruiters for foster parenting, so feel free to grab one, grab 3, put them in your yards, put them by yard signs. Stop signs, they're legal there. We've learned. And then as a church, we have this thing, so we're the only one in the state. If you guys are able to do this, that'd be kind of cool. I don't think a lot of people even know about it. I go to iTown Church out in Fishers, but we have this 30-day fast track. So in 30 days, you can become licensed to be a foster parent. We're the only church in the state with a partnership. However, Adam Krupp, who's our new DCS director, he's a pretty cool guy. A lot of changes, but pretty cool. I'm sure he would be really open to like partnering with the church to set that up. Like, I don't see that being a problem at all. And he's a big man of faith and like really diverse and doing his best. You could pray for him too. He is in a tough position leading our state. IARCA is the association for the private agencies, like I mentioned. So if you ever want to do anything with residentials or foster parents or mentoring or transporting, or you know somebody that's interested, that association would be ideal to just go reference them and then look at all your options, kind of thing. The other thing we do at iTown that I think is super cool is we have a foster care closet. So there's like 200 of us that volunteer on this team, and we'll have like a little form. It's electronic, you send it out. And if you're a new foster parent, if you're a kinship home, meaning like a relative of the kiddo who's in foster care, or even if you're reunifying and you're going back home, we'll totally same day or within 24 to 48 hours go get you some clothes. We'll go get you all your essential needs. And we have a standard list, but if they specify they want something more, we'll make an effort to do that. We have a pretty big warehouse out in Westfield that is just full of stuff, and so grateful to be a part of that. And then the yard signs, they work. They work. So I'm gonna give it back to Alex, but thanks for letting me share my story and a little bit of my resources.
Thanks, Josh. One thing I didn't say, this is one of my closest buddies. We've been rocking it since 2019, basically, and he's one of the reasons. I mean, I remember when Aubrey and I both found opportunities here, I remember calling him and letting him know that I was coming to Indiana. So he got me plugged into some really awesome people that he knew, other advocates in the state, and everything. So he's made it feel like home, really early on. He also he mentioned his dog. His dog used to be our dog. We don't have a fenced backyard, and so when Abe started walking and we were dealing with the challenges of walking a dog and letting our son walk down the streets, it became difficult very quickly, and Josh and Kristen said, "We'll take him."
We took him. He's fine.
So I guess we're like co-dog dads.
The difference is at Alex's house, he can't get on the furniture.
Yeah.
At my house, he literally sleeps on our pillows at night.
He tore up. We went through a
I
couch.
kind of messed up your habits.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. So I was gonna do just some tying into Catholic social teaching. A little background. I'm actually going through a CIA. Aubrey and I have been parishioners here for 4 years and got married here about 3 years ago. and I really think the Catholic social teaching is a really good lens to view this in, as well as what Aubrey would say, thinking about your vocation. So those are really, I think, two important ways to view this topic. I think, and I didn't write them all down, but when you think of just our rights as Christians, as Catholics, to care for those in our community, I think it's really very clear and abundant that this group of people, and not just, I would say not just the young people going through the system, but the parents of those broken homes. Josh gave an awesome example of working collaboratively with with his placement's mother. So yeah, the young person that his foster daughter. Sorry, like I probably shouldn't say.
Nickname anyways. It wasn't even like an actual name.
I probably shouldn't have. I probably shouldn't say names, but yeah, I think just being able to both see the dignity of the young person in care, but then also their parents, because I think, you know, even in my house growing up, I think there was we experienced that a lot, where some of my older siblings had existing relationships with their parents, and I think my parents did a really good job of preserving those relationships, and it was just something that was normal in our home, but is not normal everywhere. So I got to benefit from seeing a positive example of how it's done, but not everybody gets to experience that. And the laws in Kansas are different than the laws even in Indiana, when it relates to different legal rights that young people are notified of and understand when they enter the system. So yeah, I'm not going to get too into it, but just rights and responsibilities and options for the poor and vulnerable are both two of the tenets of Catholic social teaching. I even before going going back before OCIA, Aubrey and I met at SLU, so we're Billikens, and that was really my introduction to the Catholic Church, and I was super impressed going there. I had grown up in the Methodist Church, and was always really interested in this idea of social justice and you know what this call to action looks like, and how you can be the hands and feet of God, right, in your community. And I thought SLU did an awesome job of that, and the Jesuit mission was very compelling and really powerful. So so shout out the Jesuits. I think that's about it for me. I'm just gonna land the plane. Smooth landing. You have reached your destination.
Good question.
Thanks, you guys. This is really great to hear. Just generally speaking, since you've been involved with policy, can you talk about the change? What changes have been made in funding, in awareness, in prioritization at the local and federal level? And where do we need to go?
You want me to start?
Sure.
There's been a lot of changes. One of the very first things we did in Indiana 10 years ago was changing Medicaid, automatic Medicaid until you're 26. So if you're in foster care, you get that. That's great. We, back in my time, or our time, at least as it relates to Indiana as legislator, you couldn't get your driver's license. You can now get your driver's license. Back in that time, I had to get mine at 18. We fought for years, almost 2.5 years, for these things called education liaisons. So it'd be like a guidance counselor, but has a special hat specifically for foster youth or 21st century young people. The extension of foster care. 9 years ago, nationally, maybe 7 or 8 states have done this at this time. I was at this conference in DC, and I'm learning about this young man who was in a dual system. He was homeless, but he was also in foster care. And he was from New Mexico, and he was disabled. He's literally got his legislator advocating for foster care to be from 18 to 21, and then 21 to 23 for voluntary services, which is significantly less than while you're in care to 21. We won that battle too. That was super cool. In the COVID era, we mobilized together with our peers. I remember I called you about this. And we kind of just used social media to, battle Governor Holcomb during that time, saying, hey, we have about 13,000 young people in Indiana. Over the last 5-6 years, we have several hundred who are now in colleges, and now the pandemic has come here, and then we're like, okay, what are they gonna do whenever all the schools close down? So excuse me. So that was a 2.5 month battle too, but that was super cool, and we won that. And reunification and just prioritizing the biological family, that's changed nationally as well. It hasn't happened for many years. We used to just pull kids and adopt them and not focus any attention towards like, how do we wrap around the family and like help you go back to that? Because of the 20,000 young people who age out, many say like, oh, what about my family? Why didn't you take care of them? Not all say that, but a lot feel that way. So where should we go? That's a tough question. I think the system has always been broken. Even streamlining before there was a system to like the orphan train that came out of New York. I think it's still broken today, and I have to constantly remember that, whether I'm doing policy, whether I'm doing case management, whether it's in my own house and I can't get food to travel, and I'm like, why? That's totally a thing and a hassle sometimes when you're in the mix of it. But I'm not sure where to go. I think what we can do is help empower voices, foster parent voices or foster youth voices, and encourage them to talk to lawmakers to give their expertise on maybe what they think should happen. Yeah.
From a policy standpoint, one of the things I talked about out in Capitol Hill, Wendy's, the fast food, Dave Thomas does a lot for foster care and adoption. He has an organization called Wendy's Wonderful Kids, and it's an evidence-based model. And really, this is gonna sound crazy, but it's so successful because they have smaller caseloads. So they cap the amount of young people that are on a caseload so that you're able to get to know kids better. Less kids are falling through the cracks. And that's not something that states do, right? Like it's a private company that's having to support that, and so there's definitely evidence behind smaller caseloads, but you need more social workers, which is already a challenge. So that's something I think that could be a big improvement that I think no matter what state you go to could be something positive. Josh and I have also been on some calls with Firefly. They have a cool project they're doing recently.
The housing project.
Yeah, there's a housing project happening here in Indianapolis. Yeah.
What's it called? Yeah, that's okay.
So that was, I guess, February.
For foster children,
Yeah.
like the 18 to 21 maybe? Or 16?
I don't think it's actually going to have an age cap on it.
Okay.
So when services get cut off at 21, or let's just say they tap into voluntary services at 23,
Yeah.
if they're foster youth that's older, maybe they're 26, maybe they're 27, and they still try to make it and something happens. Essentially, this housing apartment complex is going to allow them to go live there for, the contract's up for 15 years. There's not a time limit on how long you can stay with really, really affordable rent. Yeah.
When you go into the foster care system, is the goal always that I'm here temporarily and I want to be adopted somewhere that's my goal? Or do I say, well, I'm just gonna wait it out and I'll be a foster care person until I'm 21? It seems to me foster care and adoption are very closely related.
It's changed through time. Back in the day, a lot of kids who would enter, like probably when we were like 14 and younger,
Yeah.
you know, when you went into foster care, you often got adopted. Okay, but now the focus has been pretty much since 2016. You go into foster care, hopefully a short period of time, it would get you back home to your bio parents.
Now,
if we
alright.
can't do
So there's
that-
that option as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But if
So
we
you-
can't do that, then finding adoption somewhere or legal permanency, or even staying with a relative, like your aunt or uncle kind of thing, we would then look at those kind of options as a second.
So the
Concrete.
biological family has to sign off on your being adoptable.
They would lose their rights, or I guess they could do it that way, but most of the time, it comes to a point of like, hey, if your biological family isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, their rights will be terminated, and then you move on to another
So you
legal
can terminate
permanency.
that,
Yeah.
So again, you go to foster care when you're young, and you're hoping that someone will adopt you, right?
Mhm.
Not necessarily,
Sometimes.
not necessarily the family you're with, but someone in the system
That's true.
is willing to adopt you. So, is there advertising going on saying, hey, we got these foster kids and they want to be adopted, and come out of here and adopt them? And
Yeah, so I think for many kids, when they enter the system, it's because their parents are having some sort of going through some sort of instability. The number one option would be reunification. So
Okay.
help the parents to get
Yeah.
stabilized if there's whatever that means,
Sure, I
a
can
job
see
or
that.
education or some sort of training or classes, support resources. If that is not an option, parental rights are terminated, and at that point they're eligible for adoption.
And
So-
how often so I have a foster child, 12 years old. How often does that family say, we want to adopt you? I mean, does it work out 50% of the time, or 25 or 75?
I think it depends on that, and it also depends on if parental rights have been terminated.
Yeah.
So if parental rights haven't been terminated,
Yeah, there's
then
no,
then we are just a place where this young person is staying until their parents get.
Yeah.
We're just a support. We're
Yeah.
somebody who's providing stability.
Well, let me ask the question, what percentage of foster children have terminated family rights?
About a fourth of our kids in the state, about 1/4 of our kids in the state are eligible for legal permanency of
Okay,
adoption.
so 3/4 of these kids are foster care, and that's all they are. They're foster children. They're not adoptable children. Okay.
At that point, and then whenever you get your foster license, like I'm with a therapeutic agency, so we can do foster care, we can do adoption, we can do legal permanency. But some companies who you decide to sign up with, Benchmark is all three as well, but you can hypothetically sign up just for adoption. Some people don't at all feel comfortable in getting involved with that reunification side, but you can sign up just for foster care and not adoption either. And then if you're in one of those homes and the foster kids' rights become terminated, then they would, yes, look to find an adoptive home. And there's this thing called the Adopt US Kids photo listing. There is a place of marketing those kids who have been just waiting a really long time waiting to be adopted. Yeah.
So the big initiative that Josh and I got involved with after Jerry was because at the federal level there was a list of 120,000 kids around the United States that
Just
their
waiting.
parental rights had been terminated, but there was no adoption happening.
Yeah. So they were just lingering like limbo, kind of like me with my experience. Yeah.
So Josh stayed out in DC. He didn't say that. After he was on Capitol Hill, he stayed out and worked for HHS, and basically went state to state with HHS to talk to governors to urge them to.
Governors, churches, young people.
What's HHS?
Health and Human
Health and
Services.
Human
Health and
Services.
Human Services, okay. And are they primarily done older children that are not being adopted, or are they all different ages?
There's a lot of different agencies under HHS. So, I mean, there's like workforce things that come through HHS at the federal level.
CDC is under HHS.
Yeah.
I think you have about
Robert Kennedy is HHS.
64 billion dollars worth of different programs. Well, just in DC that much.
I actually don't know this answer. This is for you. Of all the kids that your parents had, how many of them, I guess, storytelling, do you know how many proportionally were reunified versus adopted? Because I know by the time your mom had like James, she let him know that he wasn't going to be adopted by her,
Yeah.
but he was adopted.
Yeah. I don't know that number. I know it was kind of an interesting experience growing up because my mom, she's 80, she'll be 88 this year, and it was interesting growing up seeing young people, adults would come to our house and they'd say, did Janet and Dean live here? And they'd like reintroduce themselves and be like, hey, I'm this person. She'd be like, oh yeah, you stayed here for this amount of time, or they'd call. She has the same home phone number for like 60, 70 years. So people would just call her and be like, hey, I was just making sure seeing if you were still here. It's 913-888-8808 if anybody wants to call.
You hear Alex's
So.
voice at the end of it.
I don't think so anymore, but maybe.
I do a lot of spiritual reading, and I can tell you for sure that your mom is going right to heaven.
Doing my reading about her.
Can you talk a little bit about the demand or the need for foster parents, and what maybe that experience looks like, and how you go about that?
Well, there's a big need. We always need homes. It's just same situation when I had to go to a juvenile detention center.
Yeah.
It's just the problem's never gone away ever since I was a kid. Still is here today. There's a huge need. I don't know the exact number, but all over the state for foster parents. We often have to turn away kids at my agency because we don't have enough foster parents that are willing to do teens, or around a sibling set. It's hard to take on 3 or 4 kids that you can keep them together with their siblings. One of the things you can do is with Benchmark. There's a pamphlet in there, and if you call and you sign up for a class, you would essentially have 3 classes, 3 Saturdays. They can do it all in like a month and a half. You can spread it out across 3 months. You can do it kind of whatever pace you communicate. Make sure you communicate your pace so they're gonna make it try to get you in quicker than later. But we're always looking to grow, not just at Benchmark, at any agency in the state. There's always a need that's never met, and when those kids and those needs isn't met and you're not going to residential, a lot of times they'll just sleep at the DCS office with the case manager on that side of things. So, but yeah.
And I'll share off that. There's a lot of dangers in that. I have a foster sister that was involved in a pretty serious lawsuit through the state because of some things that happened while sleeping at the office and in some different some different things that shouldn't have happened to teenagers, and so yeah, there's some serious like risk to that as well, just the need for homes for people to stay in.
Can you, I think, get more at maybe what Lauren was asking, like, what does that look like? Like, you recently did it, was your foster daughter, if you don't mind us asking, the first time you had fostered a child, or?
Oh, okay, so that's the process, right? You got like 3 Saturdays of 8
So then
hours.
what is it like when
So
you
when
bring
you
them
actually
into your home?
experience it. So it's interesting. I'm a case manager too, right? So I lead 10 homes. Oh, it's way different when it's in your own. So we had taken in a 15-year-old, me and my wife, and we did that back in August. But prior to August through October 2024, when we were first licensed, we had 8 respites, meaning like there was a long-term home. This foster parent had to go out of state and they couldn't get approval with the kid, so now we're gonna put the kid in a respite home. So that was our kind of trial and error stage where once we had 4 boys and they were trying to kill each other, and then we had this really sweet little girl who had cerebral palsy, and we taught her how to ride a bike, and she could only kind of use one leg at that time, and the fact that she did it and she was so encouraging and independent, you know, it just like it filled our cups. So we went through a stage of like 8 months or so of just doing 8 short-term respites, and then the long-term, that was great too. Like, you know, we focused on schooling, we got her in church, kind of taught her how to drive a little. We had a lot of laughs. Yeah, and I think with the teen, another cool piece about it is like, if you're willing to sit there with them in the tough times, like it just grows your bond. You know, they actually have somebody in the corner, and once you guys get over that little hump or whatever, you know, you just really start seeing them gravitate towards you a little bit more. So when they leave, it's bittersweet. When Cece left, yeah, that's her nickname, Cece, not her actual name, but when she left, we were crying. I was, my wife was too, a little longer than me, but we were crying. Out of joy, but also out of like, man, we're gonna miss this kid. They're now part of our lives. We restructured our whole life around this kid. So to see that be a thing, it was a little bittersweet, but then we saw the reunification, right? Sometimes you don't really get to see often, like a kid go back home because their parent decided to do the right thing. And the state had honestly misjudged her parent a few times, and so through some court things and God being present, you know, she came out on the other side so much stronger, and it was just awesome. That was awesome to see. So it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet, and it can be tough though too. You just have to always be willing to meet them where they're at. Right? Those are kids who lack stability.
And just the system help in terms of like therapy for the kids or whatever. I mean, I'm sure it's,
you know,
or is that all on the foster parent to try to figure out what they need to help meet their needs for the short time or however long you have them?
It depends who you ask. Some people, if they have a great DCS worker, great. They're gonna help get that kid in therapy. They're gonna get it approved. They're gonna get all that stuff. Whatever needs to go through the judge, they're gonna get that over, get it back to you. If you have a DCS worker who has 90 kids on their caseload, you know, and you're like, man, I'm trying to get this kid a therapist and this, but if you don't realize their caseload is so overburdened, you're like, you know, you're just constantly hating DCS. They have this terrible record out there, but really, they're trying their best, but it's a hit or miss with the worker.
I think some other things, at least in Kansas, like there's different supports that are like they allow for young people as they age out. Like for instance, I was adopted, but I still had health insurance through the state till after I graduated high school. So that was something like a financial responsibility that my mom didn't have. If I would have gone to school in state, my tuition would have still been covered in the state of Kansas.
But
so,
you didn't.
But I didn't, yeah. But if I would have gone to a state school instead of a private school, I would have gotten financial support there. So there's different things that for people that are like on the fence about like, this is a commitment. There are things, and I think some of that is also maybe the difference in what Josh was saying of like, Indiana's different. So some of those things you have to advocate for a little bit when you have something in your home for them. And then I think just a call to action, another thing, like as from your question, Lauren, I try to tell people, like when I'm sitting, I do business development, I sit with a lot of people that are in law firms and things like that, and a lot of people are very career minded, which is great, and they're not necessarily maybe looking or thinking about having kids, and so I always say, hey, if you're not thinking about, if you guys are thinking you don't want to have kids, there's always a need for foster parents. There's always a need for adopted parents. So, you know, my mom in her 80s had a 5-bedroom house and had 2 of the rooms filled, so she was like, we've got space. So if you've got the space, and the love, yeah, the love is important. The love is important. Yeah, you don't even need the 5 rooms. You
If
just,
I take, if I
will
take
take
that
them.
foster child,
yeah.
what are my expectations? Do I think, well, I'm gonna keep the child for a year? Or do you tell me, Steve, we want you to take the kid for 2 years, or this is what we expect from you, Steve? Or he's coming back in 6 months, or what?
Yeah.
What's in my mind as far as longevity goes?
So you will get the status of the case. You'll get a referral that has some words on there about the kid, hopefully that are true. A lot of times you'll get a referral and some of it won't be true or accurate, or you're like, wow, why didn't they tell me this?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. They could say in 6 months we're aiming for reunification, but until you go back to court, at least every 30, 60, or 90 days, that
Yeah.
can change. So that's
The court's
ever
part of
changing.
this all the time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're not going back home without a judge telling you to go back home. That is just not going
Because
to
I
happen.
can see, you know, having your heart broken, as you said, getting connected.
That's
to
part
some
of the
kid
selflessness
that,
of the
And
thing.
then 6 months later, he's gone.
I think
That's a
we
great
have
question.
2 more questions, and
Yeah.
then I think we'll wrap up our
Yeah.
time.
And my question's a piggyback on Steve's of what do you tell someone, or maybe channeling your mom a little bit of how you can say yes to this over and over. And what goes through my mind is the fears, right? Of like adding another child, like would we need to pay attention to them more than our other children? And what does that dynamic mean for our kids? And like how do you make sure, like how do you recognizing that there's a woundedness, most likely with that child who's in the system, having to navigate it, and like, what do you tell people whenever they're kind of working through those emotional side of like, how can I say yes to this in front of all of the fears that I have?
I'll have an answer after you. I have an answer, but I'll let you speak first.
You know-
or I can just speak. It's up to you.
I'll just kick this off real quick, and then you can chime in. But I think going through it, and one of the things that we had were fears that came up a lot. Were we good enough? You know, can we do this again? Like a lot of things like that. But something that really helped me in my life was like our Thursday nights iTown support group for foster parents. Whew, wow, they just reminded you of how many wins you've already had with them, and you know, then you start to feel like, oh wow, we're actually doing pretty good. So you get to recognize those milestones just by being in community or creating that space for people who are foster parents to be in community with one another. I think that's a piece of it. And the narrative these days when people sign up to be a foster parent, more often than not, is hey, just so you know, from day one, we're going to let you know unification is probably going to be the goal. So just trying to set it up for success. And then, I don't know, maybe you can chime in. Mama Jane Jane's had a lot of kiddos.
I'll start with where you're at. I think, well, first to your question, both of us know people that have been adopted that say, I've been in the situation where my family, I was othered by my family. So my parents took the family photo with the biological kids, and then it's okay, now you join. So I think when you start like that, you can never start like that, right? Like just bar none, like the people that are in your home or your family, or they're not your family, and you have to treat them as such. I think is one perspective, and that's the perspective I feel like I always felt growing up, is that there was not necessarily a difference, and I'm sure my wife has other thoughts and opinions about that, That's just, I'd say, the overall maybe sunshine and rainbows feeling, whether it's accurate or not. But I think for people that have biological, my mom loves to say many of her 3 of her 4 biological kids all went into education, like both higher ed and high school, and she likes to say that like they kind of maybe it was a little bit of her personality, and maybe it was just like some of the things they were exposed to as they were older and they were kids that were younger in the home. So I think right, every experience that you give a child shapes them in some way, but that's not to negate that it's not a difficult fear and a real fear. But I think to what Josh said about the community of other people going through it is huge. And I think a lot of churches that have done that have a lot of success in recruiting and retaining foster parents, because you're not on an island. There's resources, there's supports around you, for both you and for the people in your home.
Yeah, I would agree.
This lady here had a question.
Yes,
We-
our last
Sorry,
question.
go ahead. You were talking about how for being a foster parent there's a licensure. Is that like a series of like trainings to get toward that, or just background checks? Like what all is entailed in that?
Yeah, so you have 3 trainings, really, that's the bulk of it. You can do it across like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Of course you have to do like fingerprinting, you have to do a background check. Yes, those things have to take place. You have to prove that you can afford your house and pay for all your bills before you can take in a kid, because they don't want you doing it just for the money or anything like that. So you have to prove your financial stability. You have to send in like your driver's license, Social Security. I mean, it's a lot, but not more than like what you would do to buy a house, besides the background check and fingerprinting, I would say.
And is it everybody in your house above 16?
Everybody in your house above 18. 18 or older has to have a background check and
Oh, okay. You're
fingerprints.
saying everyone had to be over 18.
Everybody.
Wait a minute.
You can have siblings that aren't in foster care that are like, younger.
You guys travel around giving this talk at different parishes, if you're asked?
It's our first one.
Alright,
I'll speak with him anytime though.
very interesting, love to have you at our parish.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys.